Alright, how's it going, everyone? This is Anon. None of this is financial advice, it's for entertainment purposes only. Alright, let's get started. Get everything pushed out. Alright. Here we go. Now, something's weird. My chat's not working. Let me try doing this. I'm going to try to close it maybe. And then re-add it. Docs, chat. There we go. I see it up now. Okay. So let me pull over a couple things. We'll do this. Pull that one off. We need to pull up Trading View. Bring it over here. All right. Bring that over because we're coming up on this important line right here. We need to cover a couple different things. So what else do we need up? We've got Fintel, Ortex, Dilution Tracker. Let's see. Just seeing what random and everyone said. I guess it hasn't pushed out to YouTube yet. I don't know why that is. Did this yesterday too. Alright, so if anyone's new, we do have a free Discord. Until this thing gets pushed out to YouTube on the Discord, we'll go ahead and just let you guys know there's a free Discord, and that's where most of us are doing our trading and talking about stocks. So feel free to join us. I'll throw in an invite in the chat box in YouTube right now. Let's see. I'll put everyone to the welcome channel. Invite. Make it expire never. Send a copy. Alright, here we go. So we'll put it in there now. It still hasn't pushed it out. I don't know why it's taking so long. We do have it synced up. That's strange. Well, I guess I'll just post the link because nobody's in here with me right now. Let's do this. Get the link out. Here we go. And we'll put it out to the Discord since the YouTube thing's not syncing up for some reason. Okay, we'll put it in main trading on the Discord. And we'll put it in the Ethereum. Let's see if we get some people in here. Yeah, that's super strange. All right, I see there's 2 people in here now. But it's still... Oh, there it goes. It just went out. That took a long time for it to actually sync up for some reason. How's it going? I see there's 2 people in here. How's it going? Sorry for the late start. My wife had me explain ChatGPT because her company is having her write up a summary of what it is and what it can do for their business. So they're a big company, and I guess they're trying to embrace some of the technology that's going forward. All right, so who's in here with me? I see there's 3 people in now. Seems like this. I think OBS is being slow because I'm not seeing these chats come through yet. Nope, there's due diligence. What's up, man? How are you? Yeah. Oh, there we go. Now they're starting to come in. How you been, man? What do you want to cover tonight? I'll just put sorry for the late start. Had to explain chat GPT to my wife for her work. Why does it say Restream IO? Does it come? I think I'm having issues with their product. Did it come up as me? Okay, it did. Random said, you can't do this to us. You got to be on every time. Sorry, I'm not on time. Yeah, I apologize. Well, you guys were having a good conversation in the options room. I feel like it was actually pretty productive, so that's a good thing. What's up, Ozzy? How are you, bud? Yeah. There we go. And talk about. Random wants me to lose my shirt. What's he trying to get you to invest in then? Or he just wants you to lose your shirt in general? Yeah. So this is the 4 hour. Let's go to the daily. The SPY doing weird stuff. I'm married. Oh, you're married, Infinite? So we're a bunch of us. Opinion on BBBY. Do you think it has at least another run before it dies? I mean, so here's the deal. It can still have another run. I won't say it can't. You've got a whole lot of downward pressure right now, mainly because I think they're actually selling right now. So if you kind of look at what's happened, right? So they had this nice, real big push up, right? And then this is when they announced basically dilution was going to happen. And next day was, I think, a Monday. Or this was the Monday. This was the Tuesday. So they signed the agreement on the 6th, which was this Monday. Had that big run up, and then they announced the dilution. And then it basically just started getting crushed, right? So we've only had a couple days of basically dilution, and it's dropped. So from this peak up here at like 7 something down to its current level, it's lost about 80% in those. But I mean, here's the deal: you're increasing the amount of shares outstanding a lot. Like it's a significant amount of dilution. So just off the, I believe, preferred convertible shares, it's like it could be up to 100 million shares of dilution, which basically would then give you a shares outstanding around like 217 million. So if you start thinking about that, if you divide up their assets and what, the book value would be divided by the shares outstanding, you've significantly dropped. So any spikes you're going to get, I mean, if you're sitting there and you have a cost basis of like, or like an average of like, I don't know, like say 8 or like 9, I don't know if it's going to get back up there. Like, this was still when the float was smaller when it ran that day. And then since then, it's just been because they announced that. So we found we were both playing PBLA. Okay. You guys are both playing PBLA. But yeah, I don't know. Any spike on BBBY, I don't think is going to get above the $7 range. I don't even know if we'll go that high. But that's just what I see right now. I mean, if they have a merger or an acquisition, then that's going to completely change the dynamics of that. But for the most part, like BBBY is just going to continue probably down. So, oh, you don't have anything invested? That okay? Yeah, I would say. I mean, there could be a spike after dilution if anybody wanted to get out. But at this point, right now, I'm not touching BBBY. You have puts that are red for BBBY. When did you buy them? You must have just bought them. What's up, John? How are you, bud? All right, so was it Panbela Therapeutics? They're a clinical stage disruptive therapeutics for urgent unmet medical needs. The company's initial candidate. So it's a pancreatic endo. This is what is that cancer stuff? Yeah, it's cancer stuff. So they got about 9 months of cash left on their current cash burn, but they do have some. They've got an ATM out right now. Are they using it? So they've got an active ATM right now. You got warrants as well. So I mean, there's a fair amount of dilution on the table, considering it's a small float, but they've got 14 million warrants, and they've got a ATM for 6 million shares. So it's on Reg Show. Well, so is Cal, but Cal's going down right now because I think they are using the cashless warrants. Right, because these are all warrants right here, but I believe they're cashless. So even though it had a tiny float, here, these ones right here, these are cashless. So I think that's why it's going down. They've got 2.6 million cashless warrants right now. But we'll see. But I was going to say, Cal's also on Reg Show, and it's going down. So is BBBY. So just because it's on Reg Show doesn't mean it's going to move if there's a dilution on the table. Just depends on what's going on with it. 2 weeks ago, volume was 40 million range. Yeah. Yeah, ATER has been very boring, John. You're right. It's just kind of been chilling. And, I think I showed some people. I'll just pull up ATER real quick. Right now, we've been in this down channel, and there is a gap down here that I put in manually, and it's one of those things where it's do we hit this before we start moving back up? I don't know, but I mean it's better than being down here, but at the same time, it all depends on what the entire market's going to do, which we can go ahead and take a look at the SPY if you want. But right now, I feel like we're kind of in a weird spot because the SPY looks like it wants to go down. And if the SPY wants to go down, then, it's not going to be super pretty probably for, the entire market. And that includes pretty much everything. But overall, yeah, it's kind of holding this level. This is basically what I think book value is roughly. I think it's $1.20 or something like that. That's what some of the things I've seen are. So it doesn't surprise me that we would hold support in this range, or we'd go back down to this kind of 10 to, if you drew this line out, this is where it stayed for a long time after the dilution happened. Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be boring for a while, I think. It's possible that we pop and run against the market like we did last time, but I mean, it's a crapshoot at this point. But just remember, I did show people you can pull up the inside the Discord. You can pull up one of the bots that pulls sentiment, and one of them mentioned that the newest update was the Craig Halliam $3 price buy target. So, we'll see. So that was one. You guys also wanted to look at Hoth. That one I'm not familiar with, so let's type it in. Hoth Therapeutics. Let's take a look real quick. All right, Hoth. Small float again. They're a bio for new generation therapies for, I guess that's skin disorders. Let's see. Chronic wounds, asthma, acne. Okay. So, because I see dermatological, which usually means skin, right? So, okay. So, let's take a look. They've got about 2 years of cash. That's not bad. They do have warrants, though. Let's see if they're cashless, though. They did a private placement already. That was the latest one. That was back in, looks like, end of December. All right. Traca, we can do as well. 75-cent off. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, John, about ATER with the $3. I think that's where there's some warrants at. It may take a year, it could be this summer. We don't know when it's going to run. But, I think at some point they put that price target up there for a reason. So I think they want to get ahead of it and be able to unlock their shares. So it wouldn't surprise me at some point ATER runs. But let's take a look at Hoth right now. So that's a shelf. So here are some warrants right here. Armistice owns them. Armistice is there. They also have Booth Bay, which I've heard of before. These are at $5. Share price right now is at 3 on this thing. It filled this gap here. Yeah, so there's no immediate gaps that I see. Let me hit auto. Oh, there's the gap. So there is a gap up here at 25, but all these ones have filled. That filled during there. Wait, what happened here? Was there like some sort of event that happened there? Why it went from, what was that, 14 all the way to 25 in a day and then gap down hugely to like 19? Was there some sort of squeeze on it or what? Because it doesn't really look like, it just looks like in the, maybe because it's a small float, like a tiny float that somebody just bought after hours and just completely pushed the price up. And then maybe people FOMO'd in. I mean, I don't even see volume spike up that much, but let's see. Maybe if we do it on this. Like, what happened here? I mean, there was obviously volume. There's 20 million on a 3 million float. That float might be even less. Let me check the float again. Yeah, the float's tiny. So there was 20 million volume on this day. I mean, it was after earnings. It was a couple days after earnings, so I don't know why it would have randomly spiked like that. It looks like they beat on earnings. It went down, and then the next day it largely gapped up. But, I mean, that was like a week later. I don't really know. Does anyone know why that particular day happened like that? Because it's a little bit unusual. I mean, that's a huge amount to gap up from 14 to 25. All right. So, there's that one. I know a bunch of people have been talking about the Troca one. Troca. Oh, they have convertibles. Urgh. When do they? When do they? They just registered them, or they're going to be registered soon. That's a warning. That's a huge, huge red flag. They're full ratchet, and right here, the conversion price. This is what happened to BBBY. When did this get filed? Yeah, I love convertibles, just not that kind. Yeah. I would very much say that at this point right now, I would wait till dilution's done, and then if you like the company long, because they are cash flow positive, which is good, but at the same time, they are hugely diluting. So, personally, for me, let's see what they've been doing. So they just registered these, right? They just had earnings in February, but they also announced. Why would they be up after? Oh, they withdrew their S1 form 2 days ago. Let's see. Withdrew 2 filings to potential stock sales by shareholders. The volume was. The question is why. But they've got dilution coming, it looks like. If you're in this for a squeeze on this stock, I would be super, super cautious, because you can see they've got these full ratchet warrants at $2. The stock's right now at 25, so I'm not worried about that. But these convertibles right here, conversion price at 40 cents. They're saying they're not registered yet. The issue date was on. No, that was a year ago. Wait a second. Is this what they withdrew? Hold on, let's look at this. The issue date was March of 2022. And they said here they withdrew them. That's probably why they've been going up if they withdrew them. They are retaining Jeffries, though, to optimize their capital structure. What that means, basically, is these guys are going to go ahead and try to figure out a way of raising money. That's why they would keep Jeffries around. So, in the meantime, it may go back up, but it sounds like they are trying to be. Let's see. Shares were down 10% pre-market after hiring Jeffries to optimize its capital. Stock's down 78% over the last year, but experienced a slight turn-up since the start of the year. Jeffries will support. They're going to dilute, it sounds like. So, there you go. I don't know. I'll probably stay away from this one. It may move up. There's a gap to fill right here that they missed, but I don't know if they're working with Jeffries, that means they're going to come up with some way of raising some money. So I don't know if I would be messing around with that. I mean, could it fill this gap here in the 60s? Sure. And then, they get everybody excited and then they'll start converting over. Possibly. I don't know. It just depends if they really did pull those or not. That's what the article said. So I would be cautious on this one. Because it sounds like if they're working with Jeffries 2 days ago, they're going to be issuing out some sort of dilution in the future. So sounds like Toys R Us Jeffrey the giraffe. Yep. Dumb question, but what does it mean to fill a gap? Okay, that's actually a pretty easy one for me to explain to you guys. So for those who know this, bear with me, but basically what it means is, so this is a chart of the daily, right? So on the daily, what happens is if the stock price moves significantly down or up during the after hours or pre-market, and the next day it opens up and it's much higher. So say, for example, in this case, the day it closed at 65 cents. The next day, though, it basically came through and it opened much lower than the stock had been the day before. And because it never went back up to this level to close this gap, it leaves a gap on the chart. And what that means is at some point there's not a lot of liquidity in this area because it didn't trade that much in this area. Like you had a point here, a point there, but you see it doesn't last very long. So there's not a lot of like liquidity in this like particular area. And algos like finding areas of liquidity. So what ends up happening is these are gaps that eventually should fill as long as some significant thing doesn't happen. So I use a gap detector on TradeView, which you guys can download yourselves if you like. This is just the basic version, which is why I get ads. But it's essentially just if it gaps up, you would leave a, say this day, instead of going down that day, say it gapped up to like, let's say 93 cents. That means there would be a huge gap from basically 65 cents all the way up to 93, which means that at some point you would probably want that to fill in because basically it's an area of liquidity that needs to be explored. I could probably overlay this at some point if I pay for the premium for the liquidity tool, but I bet you would see a pretty large spike out on this. Basically, they have like a bar chart where it shows where there are areas of liquidity. But yeah, it's on the daily only. So gaps are typically just areas of unexplored liquidity that at some point probably will fill. So, for example, if this stock came back up all the way to here and then went back down in the single bar. So say for example, on this day, it went all the way back up here, there would be no gap anymore. But because it never went above here during this trading day or on any of these trading days, it's left this gap up here. So same thing with this. It closed here, opened here, and it never has gotten up above this line again, which is 33 cents to 34 cents. So there's a small gap here, but it came close here, but it didn't fill the gap. So at some point, I would think it would probably fill this gap, and at some point fill this gap. I just don't know, but I'll probably just stay away from this one in particular right now, just because I think with Jefferies working with them, they're going to probably issue out more shares. So, but yeah, if it was to be able to push up and close, that's what would close this gap. If the stock tomorrow opened here, ran all the way up to here, this would close that gap. If it was trading like anywhere in between basically 33.5 and 34 cents. And then, for example, if it pushed up even higher the next day and was chopping around and then pushed all the way up to 63 cents, you would fill that gap as well. And both of these would disappear from the chart. Does that answer your question, my sensor comment? You guys just tell me if that makes sense. Good stuff. Yeah. So only happens on the daily. If you are on a 15-minute chart and chops around intraday, that doesn't matter. They're only for the daily. Like right here, you can see if I go pull up like the 4 hour, there are plenty of gaps on the 4 hour, but it doesn't matter because these ones aren't the ones we actually look for. We look for the 1 day gaps like that. And you see all those ones disappeared. Yeah, they don't have to fill, but they often fill, which is why that when we were looking at, for example, the SPY, you see right here, there's a gap up here, and that's what I thought was going to happen. I thought this was going to push up through here. We thought this was either going to reject here and head down to this one, or it was going to push up. And I thought it might be able to get enough steam to get up to this 121 gap, but it never did. It got as high as 418, and then it rejected and kind of went down. So we also left a gap right here at 408.14. So at some point, these gaps will fill, I'm sure, because gaps to the upside a lot of times on like things like the SPY. Like if you went back in history, right? The SPY just over time just goes up because you're usually dealing with the best companies in the world. Here was COVID, right? But you look at these gaps to the downside, right? There's gaps all the way down here at 229. So, like, there's a gap down here at 229. Now, will that ever fill? I don't know. But, gaps like this in the 340s and the 320s, or I guess this one is 296. So, like, these ones could possibly fill at some point. What do you think about the GNS crowd? How's their future looking, good or bad? Okay, so I think I did a actual video of it, which is basically saying that, like, I think they're doing some smart things. I also think that overall the company itself is not like, they're not turning a profit. They're not like, now granted, this PR is good for them because they're getting their face out there in front of other people. So any PR is good because they were kind of like a small nobody company, and now all of a sudden they're like the face of the revolution, or whatever they want to call it. The NFT dividend's not going to make a difference. We already talked about that. There was another company that tried it in the past, and it doesn't make shorts or close out their positions at all. I think the CEO needs to continue to tweet and put pressure on, but people want to see results. So, for example, if we go here, we type in GNS, the stock had this massive push upright. It ran pretty well. Let me get off auto real quick so I can move this around. All right, so stock had been pushing down. It was down here for a long time. CEO comes out, basically says that we're being naked shorted. We have proof of it, blah, 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 blah. And it gaps up here, right? Leaves a gap right here. And also, I think there was a tiny gap down at like 57 cents, something like that. Let me see if I can zoom in and see. I want to say there was a tiny gap right here at like, maybe it was here. It was like at 57 cents. And it never filled. But in this particular case, the largest gaps on this one are 420 and 224 would be the low one to fill. Now, here's the deal. This thing's gotten pushed down because they added liquidity back into it. So if you were to go here, take a look at, for example, GNS, right? It used to be shares outstanding was much smaller. I think, this is what the former shares outstanding were. We figured out it was like a 10 million float. Well, since then they've added. So the new float is now more like 24 million, and they actually have 37 million shares outstanding because of the S3 filing that basically unlocked a bunch, like 11 million shares of liquidity. So this was a stock that was going to like probably shoot to the moon. And now if you look at like utilization, for example, you had it up here at like almost 100% utilization. And then you see this right here. This is when they unlocked liquidity. So all of a sudden now you're down here. It dropped as low as 48. Now it's back up to 60. It will probably rise at some point again if retail stays with it. But it's one of those things where retail is just so used to being kicked around that some of them just are going to take profits because a lot of them got in down here. And, as the stock kind of bleeds off, you're going to lose some retail interest as long as, there's nothing going on. Now they can string it along and say, hey, we're putting out NFT dividends or whatever, but, it is what it is. Reverse splits cause gaps. Splits cause gaps. Yep, there's a lot of reasons gaps can occur, but we were just kind of giving this out because in this case, these ones ran up very quickly. They left large gaps, and at some point, I do believe, like in the near future, I do believe you're going to have a buying opportunity around like 420 and possibly down into the twos. I still think it's going to maintain. It's actually holding up pretty well. If you actually kind of look at this, people thought this was just going to be a straight pump and dump, and so far it's actually been able to hold above the $4 mark pretty well. It get pushed up and closed, I think, 5 today. They're going to keep putting pressure on the stock. I would imagine that the live short interest on this thing, they still have a good amount of shares to short if they want to, right? But the cost to borrow is still pretty high on this one, so I do think that they can roll the dice and mess around, but it's one of these things that shorts are probably not going super hard into this because there's so much attention being paid to them, and they still have a relatively small float. So I do think overall this thing can go back up some more, but it's just going to depend because you're going to have earnings coming out, I think, at some point coming up on this thing. Yeah. So right here, you've got earnings in May. Looks like May 15th. So at this point right here, the stock could be down in the threes, who knows? And then they'll probably push it down depending on how earnings looks. But if earnings, for example, was much better, they don't burn that much cash. So, they're not at risk of needing to dilute. They, in fact, canceled their S1 already. Yeah, they canceled the equity line, and they also, I believe, canceled out their ATM. So at this point right now, they just had these convertibles from August, right? And so that's where a lot of these things came from, the liquidity in the shares. So they're going to be able to control this for a while, but the question is, how patient is retail? So, yeah, I mean, a lot's going to depend on earnings. But, I mean, at this point right now, there's not a lot of institutions that own this thing. It's mainly just retail versus shorts. And there's not even that many shorts that are at least, I think we showed like 3%, 4% of the float shorted. So, you have to either believe that these guys do have a case against the, people that possibly were naked short selling them and possibly could win some cash from it. We'll have to see. But it's one of these that, like, I think long term, if you hold on to it, it's, obviously it's up to you what you think is going to happen. At this point right now, they have control of the stock back. It's not like it was when they were trading something like, what was it, like 100 million? It was 270 million on a 27 million share float, or 24 million share float back then. It was 10. Sorry, they had 24 million shares outstanding, so they were literally trading like 10x at some point of their free float. But we'll see now. Random says, what do you think of the potential change of the T+1 in 2024? I think it will make it harder for brokers to get away with a lot of the stuff they do. It will at least improve, it will speed up FTDs. That's one positive. But a lot of these plays that people, look at is unless you actually read out all the dilution, all the things, there's a lot of landmines that people don't run into. And same thing with GNS. Like, if you knew that the 11 million shares were going to get unlocked, you probably would have gotten out at 7 or 8. Like, just, but it was hidden inside the S3. In fact, I think a dilution tracker even said, like, they didn't see it at the time, and then they saw it once they started noticing the price going down. They were sort of like, how did this happen? And then they were rereading through, and they're like, yeah, that was like a hidden clause. It was like sneakily in there. Basically, there was this one buyer that if the 10-day VWAP went over a certain percentage, then they would be able to unlock these shares. So it was that's why you got to like dive through sometimes the S3s, which it's looking back now, like, because they had 24 million shares outstanding, and they had to float because the CEO owns like 9 million himself. So I don't think he's being entirely altruistic, because obviously the higher the stock price goes, the richer he's getting. So I do think it was annoyed with shorts and learned a little bit, and it was like, I'm going to go ahead and attack this head on, which I respect. I do think there's a lot of issues in the market, especially with small caps. So I do hope they get their money, and I hope they go to the moon. But at this point right now, it's it's going to take a while, and it's going to take retail holding on. So, what other things? But yeah, I was going to say, random. I do think that it's a positive step in the right direction. There's no reason why we couldn't have T+1. It would have helped, obviously, with situations like Ethereum. Like when we were having those things, those FTDs that built up over time, like we failed to deliver a good portion of the float during that time. But all that happened was Armistice and the other hedge funds that were in all unloaded their entire positions at the top. And then obviously retail was not running in and buying them. They were basically just taking profits. And a lot of us that held went down significantly because of that. But, it's part of the problem is you can't, when that's the reason why it's hard for quote, retail to quote unquote squeeze something. Like GameStop was definitely the exception. It's not the rule, and AMC, they diluted into their squeeze like before it really took off. So like people are like, oh, well, they pumped after. I'm like, but they would have actually squeezed like GameStop back when they had a small float. Like they could have squeezed like GameStop, but Adam Aaron was like helping his buddies out and literally let them off the hook before they actually were going to make a move like GameStop. We have the tech to do same day. Yeah, we do. The market maker, nobody wants the system to change. They're making tons of money. They're making trillions of dollars on the stock market. They don't want anything to change. Allegedly. Allegedly, yeah. I agree. Dirty. But yeah, I mean, if you were making that much money, like look at Citadel. Would they make like something like $600 billion or something like that, or $62 billion last year from all their stuff? And the next closest person was like 2.6. Like there's something inherently wrong with that. That's why they don't want any rules to change, because they're making money hand over fist. I was asking the ChatGPT thing, and I'm like, what is the let me delete some of these. Let me just see. Okay, here, I'll show you this. So I just wanted to try this out. I was playing around with the ChatGPT bot. But I said, tell me why payment for order flow could be bad for retail investors or traders due to the conflict of interest. And it said, payment for order flow can create a conflict of interest between the broker and the retail trader. This is because the broker is receiving payments from large institutions providing order flow, which can lead the broker to providing preferential treatment to these institutions at the expense of the retail trader. This could result in the retail trader not getting best execution, which they're supposed to. That's what the SEC said we were supposed to get, as the broker may be incentivized to direct those orders to those institutions who pay them the most, aka Citadel and other market makers like that. So, like, it's not wrong. When you're incentivized to basically screw over your quote-unquote customers to make more money, that's usually not what's good for the overall market. But hey, what do I know? Where do you spend $62 billion? Corner store? I'm pretty sure you could buy every corner store in the entire world with $62 billion. Buy every bodega in New York and across the world. Buy them all out. I mean, $62 billion. You could feed like every homeless person probably for like 10 years. Any update what happened with WEBR? Yeah, so WEBR was interesting. WEBR got bought out. And they paid a fixed price of, I believe it was, because it didn't move forever. I don't know if you're holding it, but whatever WEBR got to, it was right here. Oh, sorry, that's Apple. I don't know what happened. Where's WEBR? There it is. Okay, so WEBR right here basically finished out, and it closed. Why does it keep putting up Apple? Oh, because it's not listed anymore. That's why. Okay, so let me do it this way. WEBR got bought out taken private at like, was it 8 something? Like 803. Come on, give me a real one. Yeah. Paywalls. Come on. 805. So, Greg, what ends up happening is every share is bought at 805. And even though Weber had about 16% short interest, all that ends up happening is this. Because I was thinking maybe this thing could actually move up because they would have to close their short positions. But I started researching and looking into it, and I realized that essentially what happens is they just pay the owner of the long 805, and the owner just basically tells the short to close out. Like, it doesn't actually send the stock anywhere. They're just going to go through the longs, and they don't actually have to close out their short interest. So once again, a stock being delisted does not make shorts close their positions if they're being, in this case, bought out. Basically, the only thing that makes shorts close their position is if they lose control and they get margin called by their, whoever their, broker is, because they don't have enough collateral to basically keep the position, or it has to be some sort of like NFT dividend that has no actual like value associated to it. Which is what Overstock essentially tried to do, and then they got sued for it. The FINRA hates this. Like, FINRA doesn't like it. SEC doesn't like it because you're intentionally causing a short squeeze. So those are the only things that can really make a short close out their positions. That's kind of what I'm coming down to. So anytime there's a merger, anytime there's a new custom number, it doesn't seem to matter because they'll just allow the shorts to transfer onto the new cusp. So like, that's one of the things we need to like teach retail is like, listen, just because there's a merger, just because there's an acquisition, it doesn't necessarily mean the shorts have to close their positions. What ends up happening is they'll just get transferred to the new company. So, I mean, now, granted, if a big company buys you and, they're doing well, then you probably don't want to be short them, and you may, end up closing those positions because you don't want to be short the bigger company. But, in this particular case with Weber, they just got bought out for those shares, and those shorts basically get to, not have to worry about their position because they're all getting bought out at 805. It didn't matter what happens. So that's what your stuff would have settled at, was just 805. You get that money back, and then boom. So that's what happened to Weber, Greg. Your bestie Ken Griffin just buys $2,000 toilets. I bet he doesn't even own a squatta potty. Yeah, he can't afford the squatta potty. Even the nice souped up one, he can't afford it. What are the new ones? The nice ones are like $70, $80. Can't spend that kind of money. He's already got a $2,000 toilet. I do remember when I was in Iraq, we were in one of Saddam's palaces. It was like literally like he had like multiple palaces, but he had gold toilets. Like the rims of the toilets. Definitely saw a bunch of grunts walking out with one of them. I don't know what they ever did with it, because technically you're not supposed to take any of that stuff. But I definitely watched a bunch of I won't say what unit, but I watched a bunch of grunts walk out with a bunch of stuff from the palace. I didn't take anything. I was actually having to set up some stuff. So, but yeah, we used that as a post for a little bit. So I actually had to do some work there, and then I wasn't in there long, but yeah, technically you're not supposed to take that stuff. I don't know. I mean, at one point there was they seized a bunch of silver-plated AKs, and there was all sorts of stuff that we confiscated, and I don't know whatever happened with any of that stuff. There was a group that basically would go through and they're supposed to inventory and take note of all this stuff. Allegedly. No, I mean, I watched those guys do it. I don't know what ever happened to that. I would hope somehow they were able to get that back to the States, and somebody has a really cool thing they could have melt down. I did 2 tours in Iraq, so I was out there for the initial invasion, and then I was out there for basically the initial assault on Fallujah, and then the second time I was out there, I was there for the second part of Fallujah Ramadi. But yeah, it was a different time of my life. I was a lot younger. I was in my 20s when I was in, so yeah. I mean, I got to see the rivers of Babylon, which apparently is like part of the cradle of life, right? Or whatever the ruins of old Babylon. I don't know where the ruins actually were. I like half the time I didn't know where the hell we were. But where is Babylon? There was like some like ancient wonder of the world, right? Iraq. Yeah, we drove through there. There was supposed to be apparently like bunch of stuff of what was left over there. It was all just ruins when we drove through. It was near a river. Was it the Euphrates, I think? I don't know. Let me look it up. Yeah, I think it was the Euphrates. Wasn't that like Cradle of Life, all that kind of stuff? Like the Babylonians were like the ancient Mesopotamians, and yeah. There were 2 separate empires, the Mesopotamians and the Babylonians. There you go. Allegedly is Donkey's favorite word. Oh yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, Ozzy. Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys want to cover anything else, or I'm good wrapping it up early. But yeah, I do want to say that we're going to try to do things. I think Keith, I don't know if he'll ever listen to this, but Keith on the Discord had, brought up his concerns that people weren't talking about trading enough. It was just kind of all focused on squeeze stocks, and so I told him, I was like, you're right. The Discord used to be hopping, and we have to get back to that. I think maybe more people need to join in the main trading, and we'll talk about ideas and share content and education. So I do want to add some bots eventually. I did talk to Grinder and L about that, which I don't see him on here tonight, but we're gonna try to write out some bots that are going to be able to analyze volume. Basically, just we're going to be able to see if we can find some momentum stocks, if we can find that, and then once we do that, once we get some of these things filtered in, we can start looking at like dilution. We can look at other landmines that might be in the way. So eventually, we would go ahead and actually have some possible new plays that we come up with on our own. So I think we can do all this. Like this is all stuff that we can yeah. Dirty's been doing this manually. Maybe we can help him out by actually, giving him a list of things to go through. And Dirty likes GOEV. That's right. I'm reading through. Sorry, Donkey. I pointed out to L, but I haven't shown where I believe it will reverse to the upside. Plug in my finds from time. Yeah. That's kind of the idea right now, is we want to be able to kind of filter out some of those things. And like, this is all stuff we can do. Like, I mean, we've got some people that know Python. We've got, we have the knowledge of what we want to look for. So like, I think this is going to be one of those things that slowly over time we kind of build up, and, we're able to spot out things and then kind of analyze them and kind of look for landmines. That way we can avoid some of the ones where, everyone else is just looking at short interest and, reg show, and we're going, oh, wait a second, there's something going on here. So once we combine those things, I think we'll be able to kind of get everything going, and I think it'll be a good time. Like, I think we can get back to our roots where we were having fun and people were making money, and yeah. So I think that's the goal. If you can be more active, it's all depending on your time, but if you can be more active in the main chat, if you want to look at something, there's a bunch of people that kind of know how all this works now. We can kind of help each other out, call things out, and see if we can, get back to making money and making sure that it's not just watching one stock over time and everyone's, banging their head against the wall. Because I think that's the problem, is when when Tyrion, for example, which a lot of people are in, ran, it was like flying. Like, I mean, we were going up like 300% in a short amount of time, and it was exciting, and there was thousands of people. Like, I mean, we had to mute or slow down the chats because so many people were in there. And then once it went down, it just went boom. Zyme, yeah, we that's our last one. We can do that one. All right, let's take a look. Say biotech. You guys on the biotechs? I know they're hot right now. All right, 5 months of cash. They burned through a lot. That's a good amount of cash burn. Woo. They got an ATM registered. So have they used it? They haven't used it. They're going to have to use this, I think. So they do have this ATM for 17 million shares. Still pretty low float, but I do think they're starting to run out of money. And they do... Is this the same one? No, this is 2021 through Jefferies. This one's through Cantor. So they do have dilution on the table. Will they need to use it immediately? No, but they're starting to run out of cash. So when's their earnings? We can look. Let's see why are they spending so much cash? Let's look in the filings. Okay, so there is... Just look through. Sorry. Getting tired. Getting old. All right. Yeah, they're running out of cash. They've got some short-term investments that did grow. Depends on what they're investing in, though. Accounts receivable went down like half. That's not great. Prepaid expenses. So current assets shrank. They've got some financing fees, long-term investments. They've written off some goodwill. So total assets has gone down. And it looks like their liabilities has shrank slightly. But what did they spend all their money on? So their accounts payables gone down. That's good. Their fair value of liability classified stock options. So that may not be as bad the next quarter, but we'd have to see. But it does look like they have a good amount of deferred revenue, long-term liabilities right here. So that really hasn't changed. So they still owe that money out. I have to hold on to that. Let's see. So revenue shrank. Right, so revenue shrank over the last 3 months. They're spending $37 million on research and development, which is better than the year before, but they still spend a good amount. Their admin costs have gone up over the... This was about the same, but it went up over the last 9 months. So their operating costs, like general admin fees or expenses, have gone up. Maybe they're paying a lot more people. So they're losing money from the operations, and that's growing. So still in that loss on the company. Just seeing if I see anything else that's like huge red flag. That's fine. Here we go. Here are your cash flows from operating activities, net loss of $185 million. So depreciation, they wrote off some depreciation. Looks like there are lease rights of use assets went up. Shrank that. Financing costs, they took a huge hit on financing costs, it looks like. Proceeds from the... So they had to pay out a bunch from, it looks like, some sort of fundraising. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on. That's why the cash burn is so high. And they've had diluted over the time. So, it's just a lot of cash burn for a quarter. That number I'd like to see come down because that would help the company out tremendously. But I don't know their entire business model. I'm guessing they have to spend a lot of research and development. So acquisition of equipment, yep. We can take a look at news. It's a news. They've got 8 months of cash left. They do have tiny bit of dilution on top, but I mean that's not that bad. It's just a very small float. I'll be honest, this to me just looks like they're pumping. They've got... Did they go through a split recently? I mean, this could honestly just be a pump and dump. Let's see. So they have some gaps to the downside. They've got a gap down here. Where did that come up? From back here. That's a lot. Like, is that IPO? Or... So they gapped up here way back then. And now they're sitting here barcoding. I mean, what is going on with this thing? How did they go from this gap down here at like $1 to a couple months later, 2,000? That's crazy. Oh, there was a split. Okay, that makes more sense. Did they have any more? So they had another split here. So they've had some splits, which, like we said, yeah. So this is one that looks like they must have had a tiny float. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a tiny float, so to me, this just looks like somebody's pumping it and dumping it. But, I mean, unless they've got some super positive news that came out about them. But is there any news on Newsy? I mean, so here's the deal. Like, technically, if you had like a large enough Discord group or a bunch of like people like on StockTwits, they basically find something. Everybody gets in early. You know, their financials look like they improved, so that's good. But like overall, it looks like they just are trying to run up a stock that has very small float. So... And they do have dilution on the table. They've already depleted these two. So they still have an equity line that they mainly tapped out. It looks like they don't have a shelf, though, registered. They've already raised all the money on the shelf they had. They just have these ones sitting there. And you'd have to look at like the split adjusted, I would imagine, but... Nice. You're down in Texas, so I don't know a ton about this. I mean, it could definitely move. It's got a tiny float, so if enough retail investors all FOMO'd in, Sure. I mean, you could move a stock that's that tiny of a float. I mean, you're talking about like literally like a 500,000, like 500K shares. Like, the only difference is because the price right now, I mean, you would want to get in early if you're going to do something like this. And I would want to see their earnings came out. Looks like they were not like, they don't have any institutional ownership. This looks like it's just being held by retail, and every once in a while they pump it. I mean, they do have, let's see, they do have positive shareholder equity, which is better than some of the ones that I see out here. The revenues did slightly go up. Net loss was shrinking, so that's not horrible. They're still losing money, though, so and their cash is going down. So at some point they're going to need to do something, but yeah, I mean, if this gets enough volume, it will move. That's what I'll tell you. Yeah, it's a vendor of coffee, single pour, and tea bags. They pack it, I guess. So, you get one good contract, and the company has single serve pour over coffee in Japan as well as Korea and Latin America. So there you go. If it gets enough volume, it can definitely move, because anything with that small of a float, yeah. Well, all right. You guys have a great evening. What's up, Hustle? How are you, bud? Yeah, I mean, tiny, tiny float. So, short interest is pretty low on it, but at the same time, it looks like most of their dilution is pretty much, I mean, they can get some liquidity back, like 10% liquidity back, but I mean, if they push up and they unlock some of these like warrants, but for the most part, I don't know. If enough retail FOMO'd in on it, then you could see a pretty decent move on the stock price. The key is just getting in way early on something like this. I think, Dirty, don't you have some DTST? I've been sitting on it just waiting for somebody to walk around and... That's another one that's small float that every once in a while somebody rolls around and just squeezes. So I've been sitting on it just waiting for somebody to squeeze it again. Like, somebody just squeezed it. Somebody squeezed it. These are probably FTDs that they had to deal with. And then go back down. These random big spikes. They haven't had one in a while. So just been sitting there on a couple thousand shares just waiting. Yeah. I mean, it's been going down, but it's not like horrible. Just buy these dips, when it goes down pretty significantly sub 2, just, yeah, I mean, it ran from basically like 139 up to 203, so, I'm just trying to average down, because I did buy some, I think, in this range, in like the mid 2s down to the low 2s. So I need to get my average down. So if it does take another one down, they've got earnings coming up in March. Yeah, March 30th. So they've got some, some headlines that came out in December, which is when it moved back up. So, yeah. All right. You guys have a great evening, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow on the Discord. All right. Night, guys.